Hello,
Hey Riley,
how are you doing today?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I'm doing well. How's everything been going with you lately?
Well, everything has been okay. Working, studying, and also having free time to myself and my family.
Awesome, awesome. I assume are you still just working with your students, or are they on summer break?
I'm studying. I'm teaching currently in the school that I work. I'm
Hmm.
working three times on the week on Mondays, Wednesday, and Friday. And I am developing project who is called Reading Fair, and I'm trying to implement a project in the school that I work. So today I decided to talk about this project with you because I think is that something who can change the school environment and to create a nice atmosphere talking about reading because I think that nowadays they students don't read as they used to do it before because of social media. So I decided to create this project, and this is one project that I have developed, and it's called Reading Fair Board. So I'm showing to my students this board to show them how to create their own board. So I have choose Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the first book of the series Harry Potter. And that's it. It's a three-dimensional board. It stand like I don't know how to say this. Mm, well, it's three-dimensional, so
Mhm, mhm.
it stands.
Yeah.
How to say the expression? So
Um.
that's it.
So, sometimes it's not quite the same thing, but sometimes we call it a diorama. Diorama is technically different, but diorama, it's spelled like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. By the way, it's the sorcerer's stone. E after the C, so it's a soft C.
Sorcery Stone.
Sorcerer's stone. Yeah. And technically that was the American release of the book, but in Canada and in Britain it was actually called the Philosopher's Stone.
I was a little doubt about this because I think that in the original title is the Philosopher's Stone. So I really don't know what's the meaning of sorceress, but I didn't like this title. I prefer the Philosopher's Stone. This sounds more beauty, more soft.
Yeah, yeah, and to be honest with you, I mean, I'm sure I could find this information out very easily, but I've actually never known why they have this different title in the United States and in the rest of the world. Um, a sorcerer, by the way, is just a wizard, like somebody who possesses magic is like a wizard or a mage
Oh,
or anything like that is a sorcerer.
right.
Um, but yeah, I think the biggest one of the reasons is that the word sorcerer just tested better with American audiences or something, or maybe
Okay.
there was some sort of legal reason why.
Maybe it's possible.
Yeah, but that's really cool to hear that you've picked that book. Um, it's so much fun for young kids. Well, not for young kids, but for people of all ages. One thing you'll notice about you've probably already noticed about the Harry Potter books is in the first one, it's fairly kid friendly.
Right.
And by the end of it, it's actually very, very dark and very adult, you know?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because the characters are getting older so they can face harder challenges.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It takes like the whole series takes place over the span of Harry's life. Like it's very the span of Harry's childhood. Um, so as the books got released, the kids who were reading them grew up, right? So maybe some kids started reading the first one. When did it come out? 1994, I think, 97. Um,
97.
97, right?
Right.
It's the year that I was born. But some kids might have started reading that at the age of 10, and then by the time the last one comes out, they're 19, right? So they can grow up with Harry in the story.
Right, right.
Hmm.
So I don't know a lot about the houses of the Harry Potter stories, because basically there are four houses: Gryffindor, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Slytherin, and Ravenclaw.
Yeah.
Do you know the meaning of these houses? Because some people tend to say that it has to do with the personality traits. Is that true?
It does a little bit. It's kind of like how people think about their horoscopes. Like, I'm a Taurus, so that means I'm this, this, and this, and this person's a Sagittarius. That means they're this, this, and this. And it's not really. I mean, in the books and the movies, it's supposed to be a little bit like that, but
Right.
they're not an absolute. Um, they're not incredibly important, other than the fact that all wizards that go bad are in Slytherin. Not all Slytherins go bad, but anybody that goes bad was in Slytherin.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And maybe the Gryffindor, they are the heroes of the story, like Harry.
Most of the time, like they're kind of known for courage, for being brave, for being leaders. And
Right.
then Ravenclaw is very smart, very very intellectual. And then Hufflepuff, I'm not so sure about, but in the fourth book, there's a very like heroic character who's in Hufflepuff. So again, I can't remember all the traits about every one of them, but those are some very basic parts of the houses.
And I have heard a lot of complaints about the fans that have read the entire series, and they compare the books and comparing the books with with the movies. They say that a lot of things have lost when they are creating a movie. And I know that it's very difficult to create a movie and to make the fans love it. But I have thought to myself that Warner Bros. And have made a beautiful job in the Harry Potter series. And you can see that nowadays people still want to watch it. So it's something that is very pleasant to watch.
Of course, of course. And those filmmakers over the years had many very close conversations with J.K. Rowling to make sure, are we doing this right? How is
Mhm.
everything going? Are you okay with this? You know, because they wanted it to be a success. Because with other movies to books, they don't make all of them. Like the Narnia movies
Mhm.
were not. I don't think they were as successful, and those books were very successful, but the movies weren't. And same with
Right.
the Percy Jackson movies as well. It's um, another famous book series, and then the movies were just terrible.
Right.
So I think with Harry Potter, they really had to plan far into the future. They can't just be thinking about right now, but they have to be thinking about what is this going to look like 10 years down the road.
And I think that talking about Harry Potter, we can, talk about a lot of topics. But I was trying to read the story and look at the psychological side. And I have heard that Voldemort is a wizard that have never met love. So one thing that makes Harry to be powerful is that Harry had the love of their parents. And I think that it's a very beautiful thing in the story. It's very
Mhm.
symbolic, this.
Of course. Yeah. even though he was an orphan, he was old enough, long enough. He was old enough to experience the love from his parents, which means that, kind of, because orphans are very vulnerable, right? They don't have
Right.
parents, they don't have an aim in life, but Harry was never drawn towards the bad side of things. His friends as well, right? He has good friends, um, the love from his parents. And like you said about Voldemort, that's a very typical setup for any villain, is to not have
Mhm.
any family, to not have any support system, right? Um,
Because the affection of the parent creates a good people, and we can think about that thing that you are talking. A lot of villains certainly in some kind of their personal life, they have missed the love of the parents. It totally makes sense.
of course, of course. Or maybe not. There's not really anybody in their life that understands them.
Right.
Not even like good friends or anything like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot to be studied with the psychology in Harry Potter,
Hmm.
because his friends also come from not difficult backgrounds, but backgrounds that make them different in some way. Like Ron comes from a very poor family. He has a lot of brothers. He
Right.
understands difficulty. He understands not having the best things in life. And
Hmm.
Hermione is kind of bullied for being smart. She's very intellectual. She's very, what's the word here? She's very
Talkative.
curious. Yeah, she's talkative. Um, she can be a little controlling sometimes, and she
Hmm.
comes from a background of people who don't were not wizards themselves. Um, and becomes more of a storyline in the second book and the second movie. Is Hermione does not come from a background of magic, so these three characters can really relate to one another. And obviously, Harry comes from the Dursley family. His parents aren't around, so they can all share that kind of bond with each other.
If you could pick your favorite book of the series, which one would you choose?
So actually, I actually have not read all the books. I
Right.
was kind of at the time where I was a little young when the Harry Potter books were coming out, so I started reading them, but I had already seen all of the movies. And so
Right.
it kind of made it not so much fun for me when I was reading them, and I was just picturing the movies in my head. I'm the kind of person where if I don't see the movie first, it's easier for me to read a book. But if I do see the movie first, then I probably won't be motivated to read the book. But
Hmm.
I really like the second movie and the second book, because um in the first movie and the first book, there's so much time that is spent on telling the origin story. But with the second one,
Right.
we know everything. We know what happens. We
Exactly.
can just sit down and enjoy. So
Hmm.
I like the second one. And then my favorite movie is the sixth movie.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
I think that the beginning of this chapter one and the chapter two, maybe they are, as you said, more family friendly, and the last ones are more darker, and maybe sometimes we could say it's like a horror movie because there are some scenes that are very strong.
Yeah, especially Voldemort. Like, when you look at the way they designed that character, he's very creepy.
Right.
When they took out the nose and everything, like, um, yeah, like I sometimes wonder about what it was like to be the other actors and have to be around that guy, because I think it would have been very scary to watch, just the way he moves and the way he talks. It's scary. It's really scary.
Exactly. So,
Mhm.
coming back to the board, I have chosen to put the main topics, the main idea about the book.
Mhm.
like the main character, the resume of the script, and the conflict, the major conflict, also the resolution of the story. And then they will present the main ideas of the books that they will choose to the audience who will visit the school.
Hmm.
I really want to create, a skill culture of having fair reading fairs every year. Is
Mhm.
something that it can be very good for them. Have
Absolutely.
you participated in anything like this? Do you have notice of something that have happened in your city, for instance? Do you know reading fairs?
They used to do something called a book fair, which is different. It's just like a chance for you to where they bring books to your school and you can select something, but that's different. One thing that we used to do in my school was book reports. So in my English classes, like my English language arts classes, we would all pick a book that we have read in the last year. Like it's kind of assumed that you didn't read it 10 years ago or something like that. Like it's assumed that you read it recently. Um,
Right.
and you have to get up in front of the class and present it, kind of like what you're doing with this board. Like you might have like a presentation or something and you talk about the major characters, what happens
Hmm.
in the book. Just basically it's basically a way for the teacher to check that you are reading something and you understand it. um,
Yes.
but yeah, those were always fun because it's a chance to show that you understand what you are reading, but you can also check out what other kids are reading and see, oh, maybe that would be interesting for me to read, right? Because sometimes kids, they don't read because they aren't interested in anything, but they also don't know where to look. They don't know how to find the best books. So it was very effective, I think.
Well, that's it. I'm still trying to look for the better way to plan this fair, but I have choose for each different group, each different grade, a different book genre. Like the
Genre.
sixth grade, they're gonna present fairy tale books for the audience. The
Hmm.
17th grade, for instance, adventure books. The eighth grade,
Hmm.
horror books. It was a way that I have, find to organize and don't make a mess, because if maybe they could choose the book that they really wanted, maybe it was, I don't know, maybe it could be a little confused, a little messy. So I decided, to organize, because for me in the school, organization is the key. You have to organize, to plan
Hmm.
everything,
Hmm.
to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good idea of giving every grade a different genre, because it get they're not they don't feel the pressure of, oh well, another grade is going to
Mhm.
do this better than we're going to do it. And so everybody at every level brings something to the table. you know
Exactly.
we're sixth grade, we're going to talk about fairy tale books. Nobody else is doing that, so we get to teach people about that. And then the
That's
adventure
it.
books and
That's
then
it.
the horror books as well. What sort of like horror is definitely a bigger genre in film than it is in books. What are some of the titles that they are reading for the horror books?
Frankenstein, for instance, they're gonna read it
Oh yeah,
by, I
okay.
think it's Stephen
Stephen King.
King.
Yeah, Stephen King. Yeah.
Stephen King.
Awesome. That's a long
Uh,
book.
yes, I think it's a long book.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
problem. Some of them they definitely they won't read, and I really would expect that they could read, but some books are so large that they can't read, and I
Mhm.
understand it.
There's plenty of great titles by Stephen King that are shorter as well. Like if your kids have heard of Misery, or there's some good short stories like 1408.
Mhm.
There's plenty of good um, kind of shorter length novels by Stephen King that are very fun as well. Yeah, I've only read a little bit of Stephen King, but he's a very talented writer. Very easy to read him, I think.
Stephen King, it was him that created The Sixth Sense.
No, The Sixth Sense, I think, was an original script. Um, it no, yeah, it was an original script by M. Night Shyamalan, which is also a
Oh,
good movie. Yeah,
right.
yeah, very good movie. Yeah, but yeah. Anyways, the Stephen King's got some great short length novels as well, and Frankenstein's a good selection too.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the difference between horror and a genre that I have heard recently and people are calling dystopia? What is exactly a dystopia?
Dystopia is not really a genre, or maybe it's a subgenre, but like it's like, okay, adventure is a genre, but then there's like
Right.
space adventure, right? Then
Hmm.
there's space fantasy. It's all within the genre of adventure. Dystopian is kind of, it can be an adventure genre, it can be sci-fi, but dystopia is the opposite of a utopia. So a utopia, dystopia. So utopia is a perfect world. Everybody has what
Hmm.
they want. Everybody's happy. Nobody suffers.
Right.
Um, nobody gets treated unequally, or no, sorry, nobody gets treated unfairly. That's a utopia. And a dystopia is the opposite. It's disaster. There's suffering. There's famine. There's death. That's a dystopia. So sometimes, you know, there's like a lot of post-apocalyptic worlds, or apocalyptic worlds in books are dystopian. It
Right.
usually goes along with sci-fi or fantasy is dystopia.
Hmm.
Hmm.
You bring a point because I have never thought about this difference. The words are very similar, so yes, now it makes sense for me because utopia is a perfect word, and dystopia is the word in war and everything is a mess.
If you want, there's an interesting sci-fi. It's a short story. Your kids might be interested in. It's very short. It's easy to read. It's called "The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas" by Ursula Le Guin. Oh, am I spelling that right? Ursula Le Guin, who unfortunately just died. But it's a short story about what we're talking about here. It's describing a perfect world. It's telling you there's fountains everywhere, there's sunshine every day, people live in magnificent houses, people
Right.
don't have to work. But somewhere underground in this place called Omelas, there is a small child who lives in a dungeon cell who has an awful, awful quality of life. The child is alive, but
Hmm.
is going to live its entire life in this awful place. And
Okay.
so if you are a person who lives in this utopia, um, if you like, you have to be made aware of this. Like, all citizens have to look at this child at one point,
Hmm.
like once a year. And if you walk away, if you leave, you're not allowed to come back. So it's a story about the question of, is a utopia possible? And
Right.
if it's only possible if a child suffers, would you still want to live in it? So it's
Hmm.
very much like what we're talking about here with utopia and dystopia. And it's short, very, very straightforward. I think your kids would like it.
It seems to be a great story because it makes me question, is it possible a perfect world? And no, the answer is no. We can live in the reality. There are good things, there are bad things, and I think that definitely it would be a great tip for them. Thanks a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 You're welcome. That whole idea of really, no matter how perfect it seems, it's not realistic. It's not possible. And that, yeah, like you said, that's a lesson they can learn from reading. I read it when I was
Nice.
in college. I read it when I was in college, but I remember thinking when I was reading it, I remember thinking like this is actually pretty easy. So for grade 7, grade 8 kids, it's it might be a good idea.
If you could pick a book genre, which one would you put on your top three, for example?
Oh boy, I haven't read in a very long time. I just finished. I finished my first book in March. That was my first book since before my degree. So I haven't read in a
Oh,
very long time. But I like. I when I read a lot, I used to like adventure books, and I also used to like science fiction a lot, and drama can be good. I like short stories a lot too. I think science fiction fits very well into short stories or like short novels, um, because science fiction is usually an idea, a philosophical idea, and sometimes it doesn't always make a good full length novel. You just want a small little taste of the idea. So I think sci-fi short stories are one of my favorites, and then also
mhm,
horror. Sometimes horror short stories. I read some Stephen King short stories sometimes.
right.
Um, they're very fun. Yeah. So like adventure, sci-fi, and not really fantasy, some sci action drama sometimes. Yeah.
1984 by Orwell is a sci-fi book.
1984. I guess you would call that sci-fi. I haven't read it. I've seen a movie that's very much like 1984 called it's actually called Brazil. Maybe you've heard of it. Brazil was
Mhm.
like came out in like 1985 or something like that. You could probably say that's sci-fi because it's sci-fi is usually defined by a philosophical idea that is that could become a concern in the future. That's why so many sci-fi movies like 1984 are set in the future. It's kind of like what are the problems we will deal with in the future.
Nice.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's a sci-fi.
And nowadays we can see that there are some reality shows like Big Brother, for instance, that it shows some things that in the book they have said before. So,
Yeah.
like now today we live in a reality that everyone sees you all the time. So basically, and also I can think about Black Mirror, who is also a sci-fi who happens in the future.
Oh yeah,
So
Black Mirror is um, sci-fi from beginning to end. It's complete sci-fi. Yeah. Um, Another good sci-fi is I'm trying to think about a good book, not just movies, like Isaac Asimov. Oh, actually, there's another short story for you before we leave. Ray Bradbury, The Velt. Um, we might have to talk about this next time, but it's about um, children and what access we give them to technology.
okay.
Um, Perfect for your grade 8 students. Perfect for your grade 8 students. All right.
Have you typed the name
Oh, sorry.
in the chat
There you go.
box?
There you go.
Oh, right. Great. It was
Okay.
great talking to you. I have learned a lot. It was amazing.
It's always nice talking to you, Luan, and I'll see you next time. All right.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.